Any stragglers? That's all right. Well, Happy New Year, guys. Did Zach get one of these? Zach will be filling one out. All right. Well, welcome. Thanks for coming out Thursday night. It's Thursday night, right? It is. Okay. Just double checking. It's a good night. It's been nice out. So you guys are here, obviously, to talk a little bit about New Year, New You, kind of creating some changes, hopefully for the better. I hope so. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about change. What do you guys? Who can give me like a concept like what is change? What does that mean to you? What does it mean to change something? Ooh. Pattern disruptor of a pattern that's already been developed. I like that.
Scientists would call it delta,
Delta. Uh-huh.
and can apply to anything.
100%. Yeah. I like that. You can break it down scientifically for sure. Anybody else got thoughts on change? I mean, we got some good starts for sure. So in the worksheet, we went over this. What were some ideas of like ways that people can change habits?
Accountable.
Accountability. Okay, that's a big one. You can't really change something that you're not having ownership for. Expectations should be reasonable. Yeah, don't want to like set yourself up for failure. Right on. Cool. All good things. So I'm gonna read a quote. If you guys have maybe heard this one. Change happens when the pain staying the same is greater than the pain of change. T. Robbins. I just hit the microphone. Um, what does that mean to you guys? So like, what does that mean? The pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change. Well, you're in pain, so yeah. If you're in pain, same old crap. Mm-hmm. So you're not really going to change something until you get to that point, right? Typically, if you're just kind of spinning your wheels, doing the same things over and over again, if you don't feel the need to change something, you're not going to. So there has to be some level of pain associated with the need to change. That's how I see it. What do you guys think? Yeah. All right. So when we looked at the different categories of things you can change, I kind of picked out things that we can change. Now, when we do change things, it's probably a good idea to pick things that you can versus that you can't. But you also want to think of like the type of change. So there are different types of changes that can happen. Some would be quick, some can be slow. So the difference between a quick fix versus a long-term fix, what would be the difference between those? So quick might be a little bit easier to achieve. What would be an example of like a quick fix? Changing your got a flat tire, just swap it out for something. Yep. There you go. Change your pillow.
My quick fix was waking up a half hour earlier.
Okay.
That benefited tremendously.
So that's something you could start right away. No. Yeah. Perfect. So waking up, but for some people, that might be a more difficult thing. Could be more of a habitual thing for them to change. So what might be easy for somebody might be difficult for someone else too, right?
That changed my whole morning routine.
Yeah, it's
Changed my
big.
attitude when I walked into work.
And something small too, right? So a half an hour and time is an important aspect when you're looking at changing things because a lot of the times we don't have enough. That's one of our reasons for not changing. We don't have enough time. So between these two, what do you feel like would be a better solution if you want when you're talking about health and wellness, typically a long-term change would be a more appropriate response. Why would that be? Something long-term when it comes to health and wellness versus something short-term.
Because you're going to see tomorrow, but
Mm-hmm.
you're not guaranteed next year. If you want to see next year, you better make tomorrow.
You want to plan ahead, plan for the future? Absolutely. What about taking into account tissue repair, tissue healing time? Those things aren't like that, right? So a lot of times changes, they're not miraculous, right? They have to take a lot of effort, they have to take time, and there has to be a certain amount of pain associated with the need for the change for it to actually occur. So if you're going to be making changes, you want to ask yourself, do I want a quick change or do I want a long-term change? So something to think about. What are some things you cannot change? Dr. Shelby? Oh, tell me about that. Yes. So
This is not my presentation.
no, that's great. That's fantastic. But you hit the nail on the head. So so you have a certain gene code, right? Now there is a concept of something called epigenetics where your environment plays a role into what genes are turned on or turned off. And this is a big field of research that's been going on for the past probably 15 years. And it's very important to recognize how important your environment is as it relates to your genes. Because a lot of people will say if they're trying to change something about their health, right? They'll say, oh, well, my grandmother had it, my mom had it, now I have it. And typically it's going to be some type of chronic condition, arthritis, heart disease, depression, anxiety. These are chronic conditions that are strongly tied into your environment. So if your environment can actually affect the way that your genes present and they turn on and off certain pathways in your body to either build or break down, it's kind of important to know that, right? So if your goal is change and some of the goals you think you're not able to change, what I would suggest to kind of push you in the direction of is look at your environment and is that contributing to your genetic presentation of this thing that you want to change. But that's true. Genetics, you can't necessarily change your genetics, but you can change how your genes are interacting with your environment. So if I was born and I didn't have an arm, can't change that. Don't have it. I mean, I could get a prosthetic, I could do something, but I can't change the fact that I don't have an arm. What would be some other things that you definitely cannot change? You don't have a leg. We can go through every body part. Anybody else? Teeth? Sure. Neurodegenerative disease. And even, something like that. Mm-hmm. Anything else? But mostly like physical, like you were born without this thing, right? Those are typically the things, absolutely. Are there any other things that you absolutely couldn't change? That don't have to do with body parts?
You're talking genetic things.
No, not necessarily. Anything.
Your race.
Your race. So that, it's kind of genetic, racial. Yep. It's the color of your skin. I mean, you could like bleach your skin. You technically could do something about it. You can get tan. You could. The reality of time. Mm-hmm. Although some could say that that's even a construct.
Big construct. Big construct.
But it's hard to make time. Like 24 hours in a day, if that's all you're dealing with, that's what you got. Cool. Anything else you can think of? Things, well, I put this in here. Things you're not willing to put in the effort to change. Can't change that.
Your family, you can. I wanted to say that, but.
Right, you can pick your friends, but you can't pick your family. Or, right? Now, when it comes down to like, ultimately you can just physically remove yourself from something. But the fact that they are your family, or like, if you're a parent, like I've heard people say like, oh, you have a kid, you can't just not have a kid. Well, you technically could, morally, not the best idea. Yeah. Marco knows about that one. But yeah, there are certain things that, like, yeah, from a moral perspective, it's best not to change. But when it boils down to it, physically, you can change, right? But yeah, change is kind of a complex topic. There's a lot to it. When you break it down, how many things really are there that you cannot change? And one of the main determining factors is the will to actually change something. And the will to actually change something comes from the discomfort or the suffering or the pain that you're in the moment. So it's kind of crazy. It's life, man. Now, as far as like creating change in something, we talked about time. Now, it does take time, takes effort, takes pain. These things all typically create the path to change. But we have to think, if our goal is health and wellness change, how much time are you willing to put towards yourself and towards this change? And how much time is necessary to actually create the change? Like, realistically speaking. And you don't have to answer any of this necessarily, but I picked a few topics that are popular in what's called functional medicine, where you look at lifestyle modifications. So typically you look at the things that you can change that are within your grasp. Can you change your mindset on something? How do you know that? Okay. Wouldn't have been there probably 3 months ago, would have been a different story. Yeah. Okay. So you've lived the change. How do you know you can change your mindset?
Well,
I think we've done it.
Yeah.
Thinking back to where you were like 5 years ago, I know I was not
Mm-hmm.
like mindset.
It's kind of crazy. And you didn't necessarily make the intention to change your mindset. So those things can change without even wanting to. So imagine putting forth effort and time and resources to change something that's already going to change as it is. But yeah, you were going to say something,
I
John?
was just like doing research on that particular thing,
Yeah.
to broaden your knowledge on it, and then you can kind of weigh it out better than not knowing.
Yeah.
It's hard to make a decision when you don't have the information.
Well, yeah, doing research and figuring things out is very important, especially if you're going to decide to go into something. But yeah, mindset, a lot of people don't realize it's a choice. As painful as that might be, it's a choice. And to come out of it creates practice. You have to build your mental muscle into going in a certain direction or having certain thoughts. Sometimes you have to fake it till you make it when it comes to a mindset shift. What about movement, exercise? How much time should we be spending with ourselves moving mindfully every day? And what does that mean, moving mindfully? Could be intentional movement.
Intentionally walking.
Yeah.
the dog.
Not just in robot mode, repetitive motion. I think, right. Yeah. Like I could say, I'm on my feet all day. I move all day. No, if I didn't do anything, I would end up in this position because this is where I am all day long. And it's a constant battle against that position. How long should we spend? If we're spending 8 hours a day in a certain position, how long should we spend to reverse that? I don't know.
I was gonna say 30 minutes.
These are the thoughts I want you guys to think about. Because when it comes to setting goals, which we're going to do the class on in a couple weeks, we're going to go over how to set SMART goals. And they have to be specific, they have to be measurable. Like, how much time? Do you have time? What is time? Social construct. What about nutrition? Does that take time to change? Do you need time to have better nutrition?
I don't think you necessarily have the time,
Mhm.
but it helps to have it where, well, it's learning about it too.
Yeah.
I guess
That's your research, the mindset.
It's a mindset.
Yeah.
Every person's going to be different on that. People have vices for coffee and some don't.
Yeah, and we get into addiction, that kind of stuff. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, everybody's gonna be a little different, and it could take a little bit of time to break free from addictive patterns, especially when we're talking about food, because sugar is a strongly addictive than cocaine, and they've done animal studies on that, and it's insane. But they pump that crap into our food in droves. It's just insanity. But time you'd have to, if you're cooking all your own food, now you gotta have time to cook, you have time to meal prep, you gotta plan your menus, you gotta do all that stuff. So it requires time. How much time are you willing to spend? Hydration, how much time does that take? Timey, I'm gonna slam this whole bottle right now. How much time does it take? That was like 1 second. I could break that up a few times. Sleep, does that take time? Should take more time for some people. Yeah, there it is. All right. So that's a big one. It's like sleep. It's like I can't get sleep. And those are like things you can't change. So if you say you have a toddler, if you have children, they wake up in the middle of the night, like you have things, that's difficult to change that. Right. Dogs, cats that, yeah, my cat the other night scratching on my door at like 3 in the morning. I'm like, what? See, sister scratching on your door. It's crazy, man. But around that, there are certain things you cannot change. So it's kind of like, all right, what can you change about sleep? Quality of sleep. So are you getting into deep REM sleep when you go to sleep? Are you drinking alcohol before you go to bed? Because there's research that shows it doesn't let you get to that depth. It helps you fall asleep, but you don't have a deep, restful, reparative sleep. So a lot of different substances can do that. Cannabis. Yep.
If you sleep too much, don't you get tired again?
Yes.
So is there a research number that keeps changing with, now it used to be 8, now I hear 9,
Yeah.
or is it just experiment on
It's
your
gotta
own?
be per person though.
I think
Right.
some.
You can't throw such a guideline out like that.
It's all over
My
the
kids 6
place.
hours sleep at night,
Hmm.
if I'm lucky.
Some people do great with 4 hours. Some people do great with 10. So as far as sleep, that's a whole separate class on sleep hygiene. But I just want you guys thinking like these are the things that you can change that are going to have the biggest impact on your health. But it's the willingness to change them and how much time are you willing to spend on changing these things? Because some of them take a lot, some of them don't. Hormesis, has anybody heard of this term?
No.
I'm sure you guys in the back have. So hormesis is the concept of inducing a stress into the body to have a positive result. So that could be fasting, it could be cold exposure, heat exposure, breath work, where you're changing the CO2 levels in your body. But it's basically things that if you did at extreme levels could kill you, but if you do them at smaller levels, they actually have a net benefit on your health. That you are the shooting star. Don't you know? All right. Mindset. Let's get into that a little bit more because we talked like that is something that naturally changes over time for most people. But if we were to put some time and put some effort into actually changing it, what would that look like? So if you dive into a little bit of research, in which all these slides are based on research, mindfulness meditation, which is something as simple as sitting and focusing on the feeling of your breath going in and out of your nose for 5 minutes a day, has a reduced level of cortisol in your bloodstream, which is your stress hormone, which has a negative effect if it's at high levels chronically throughout the body. So that's a gratitude journal has been shown to increase dopamine levels, which is our feel good, serotonin levels, reduces cortisol levels. Visualization. Have you guys ever heard that term before? What does visualization mean? Seeing something, right? So like using your imagination, but basically imagining what you want to happen kind of seeing it, feeling it. They use this in professional sports. I mean, there's no doubt that this works and to some degree of reducing stress levels. Like you've been through this like you've felt it in your body, you've been there before. It's not something that's unknown now. You've kind of experienced it in your mind, so your body's more likely to move in that direction. Because anything that's unknown, you're less likely to go into, right? So this is just little tips you can look at as far as mindset are concerned. Anybody else think of like another technique you can use for mindset? What's manifestation?
Like doing things, like, so it's like, I feel like it's the next step of visualization.
Mm-hmm.
Is like taking the future that you want to work towards this visualization.
Yeah. So it's like seeing it, but then actually taking action. That's the manifestation piece, is take massive action or deliberate action based on your visualization. That's awesome. Has anybody ever heard of emotional freedom technique? I just thought of this one. This is another one where they use acupuncture meridians. It's called tapping. And as you're tapping on these certain points, you're saying in your head, every day in every way, I'm getting better and better, or something like that. You say some mantra over and over again. And you're basically, I don't know how it works, but there's been research on it, and there's been similar reduced anxiety levels, like depression scores on outcome assessments. It's interesting, and it's something else I just thought of. There's a lot of different like mindset type things that are out there, but it's like just realize you can change it with just a little bit of effort. It doesn't take 5 minutes a day, is not a whole lot of time. And while you're doing this, you could be doing this, and then right when you're done, you can do that for like a minute. It's like 6 minutes. Imagine if you did that every day for like 3 months, what would happen? Maybe. Movement. How much movement should we be getting? Now, this is all like if you want to change blood levels, and there's different. This is a bit extreme. 60 minutes. It's not crazy though. 60 minutes a day. If we spend 8 hours a day in one position, repetitive motion, spending 1 hour to reverse that process seems like a fair trade-off to actually get a net benefit result. So aiming for about 60 minutes a day where you're doing deliberate, intentional movement, whether that's stretching, lifting, therapeutic movement, just getting your heart rate up a little bit, 20 to 25 to 50% of your resting heart rate. That's like where you're breathing heavy, but you can still have a conversation with somebody next to you. Stretching, mobility, 10 to 15 minutes of that. I would increase that definitely to 30 minutes if you are stuck in a desk all day. Now, with that, if you're at a desk, make sure that your desk is ergonomically sound. You're not stretching your spinal cord all the way out when you're sitting in this position, decreasing your lifespan with every hour that you sit there. Micro breaks are a very important one, especially if you're sitting at a desk. Every 20 to 30 minutes, fascia starts to creep and lock itself into a certain position, and you're going to have to use 10 to 15 minutes to get out of it. So micro breaks are important to prevent the body from solidifying itself into a chronic posture. So every 20, 30 minutes, you set a little timer, 10 to 15 second breaks of just getting out of that position and going right back to what you were doing makes a huge difference. What are some other movement things we could do? So we got our aerobic type activity, but aerobic doesn't necessarily have to be on a cycling, on a treadmill. Like you could be circuit training where you, like in here, we have different circuits. And if you guys have been through the therapies here, like you start to sweat a little bit. Your heart rate does go up 25 to 50%. So there's a method to the madness. What are some other things you could do from a movement perspective to try to hit that 60 minutes a day? Yeah, go for a walk. You could go to the gym, work out. You could lift. Yeah, go do yoga. What else? Oh, so little things like that. Like, so if you have the option of parking your car further away, getting more steps in. We all have step counters on us somewhere, on our phone, on our watches, like they're everywhere now. They're watching you. They know how many steps you took today. But yeah, different things like that. They all add up. Hydration, it's a pretty simple mathematical formula. Now, as far as simple, it just means the math is simple. If you are on the heavier end of the spectrum, it's going to be a little more difficult for you to get in enough water. So half your body weight in ounces, ideally filtered water, reverse osmosis, charcoal filtering at the minimum. If you're drinking caffeine or things that dehydrate you, so sodas, got to replace that amount with more water. 1 second per sip. All right, hormesis, we talked a little bit about it. I just put in some little examples. But basically, deliberate exposure to a stressor that could potentially harm you if done excessively is going to have, these are ones that have a specific net benefit. So when you look at how much we eat, you don't necessarily have to eat 3 meals a day. We're all, that's ingrained in our heads that we have to do this. You don't necessarily have to. So there's intermittent fasting, 8-hour windows, you skip 1 meal. 16-hour, you skip 2 meals. 24-hour, you're basically eating 1 meal a day. Yep, some people do great with that. Some people don't. Some people who have issues with their adrenal glands can do better on little meals spread out. So it's not for everybody. That'd be more like calorie type restriction if you're trying to relieve or remove your fat content of your body, your adipose storage. If you're trying to tap into that to burn it, there has to be some level of there has to be a deficit of calories that you're taking in to what you're burning. It has to happen. Saunas, from research has been 140s more in the infrared sauna spectrum, where 220 is up into your traditional like Norwegian type saunas. The studies that were done on that, 5 days a week, up to anywhere from 30 minutes to 60 minutes each time you do it. It's a lot of time spent in a sauna, especially if it's at 200 degrees. That is hot. But they actually looked at saunas intermixed with cold exposure. But the saunas, the traditional saunas, what was it? Human growth hormone, I believe, was the study was done. And it like increased it like tenfold or something ridiculous. So that's like your body's way of repairing damaged cells. It was insane. Cold exposure is another one that has a huge effect on dopamine and serotonin. So if you have issues with depression, anxiety, that is a huge one. Reduces inflammation. 11 minutes a week, anywhere from 55 to 35 degrees Fahrenheit, were kind of where a lot of the studies were done. The biggest one that was done was at like 55 degrees, and they were submerged in the water for a very long time, like up to an hour. But they also found that these shorter exposures at lower temperatures had a similar effect on the dopamine levels. Breathing exercises, it's a way to tap into your autonomic nervous system, which we feel like we don't necessarily have control over, but that drives a lot of the fight or flight response in the body. Box breathing is used by Navy SEALs, where that's breathing in 4 seconds, holding 4 seconds, breathing out 4 seconds, holding 4 seconds. Going through that cycle reduces your cortisol levels, helps to get you into a parasympathetic or rest and digest state. Buteyko method is breathing through your nose only at almost an inaudible rate. You can't feel or hear your breath, but you're breathing in and out very, very slowly. You get a little lightheaded when you're doing it. Your mouth starts to water. It stimulates your parasympathetic nervous system. Wim Hof method probably has, I'd say all these have research behind them. Wim Hof has more in the realm of helping your immune system, so battling viruses, bacteria. It's basically large inhalations, relaxed exhalation with breath retentions, up to like 2-3 minutes of breath retention, but you start slow. But the idea of these is that they stimulate your body's fight or flight response, and you have to learn how to relax into it. So again, these are all pretty much separate classes that we can hold at some point. And nutrition. This probably would take the most amount of time for most things to change in people, right? Anti-inflammatory diet, that's basically removing inflammatory products, which are your processed sugars, grains, and oils, increasing your omega-3 to 6 fatty acid ratio tremendously. So eating more green leafy vegetables, you can get, beneficial fats from your flax seeds, olive oils, even things like grass-fed butter are okay. But essentially why you want to focus on nutrition is providing the tools that the body needs to actually rebuild itself. What I would recommend if your ideas change with something like this, it's better to dive in so that you feel a net benefit from it and then kind of taper off and cheat a little bit. So it's best to kind of get in there. And again, if you're looking for quick fixes, nutrition's a difficult one. Long-term change with nutrition is going to be a much more realistic set. And you can dabble, kind of cut little things out here and there, but you're never going to see a large impact on your health until you just cut it off, go very, very clean with what you're doing, and then you'll feel it. And then your body's going to start to reduce its sensitivity to certain foods that are not great for it. And then next time you eat something that's not great for you, your body's going to react stronger to it. Now you're going to have an aversion and be less likely to keep eating that food. But again, a whole separate topic. But I wanted to go through some of these for you guys because it's like the purpose of today's class was just be like, all right, what can I change? What can't I change? And what is it going to take for me to actually be willing to change these things? And ultimately, the things on this list here, all of these things you can change. We talked about genetics, but even that, you have a very strong relationship to your environment and how your genetics are presented. I can't help you if your arm's been chopped off, but that's that. So we don't have to talk about things that you want to change. I want you guys to bring that home with you and start stirring around in your head. So next time we meet, we're going to be going over goal setting, which will be more specific. So you might have 5 things that you want to set goals towards and kind of step into the next level of manifesting and setting those action steps. What kind of questions you guys got for me at this point? Because I feel like I was talking for a way too long time. I'm going to hydrate.
Give me one more rundown on the genetics and how you can change that.
So environment can change genetics, your genetic activation, so to speak. So if you look into studies of epigenetics, sometimes they'll use like identical twins that have been separated for a while, how one will present with an illness and one won't, and say maybe there was exposure to a heavy metal in some region, or this person's diet was terrible, this person's diet was amazing.
Okay.
But essentially, that's how these triggers, the lifestyle triggers, can impact a genetic.
But they both have the same genetics.
Right.
So you're not changing their genetics.
You're changing the
their
environment.
exposure.
You're changing the environment, which then changes your body's active.
Reactions.
Exactly. It's presentation of your genetic predisposition. So if you are in the midst of a genetic issue, it's best to look at your environment and see what you can change to have a net benefit result, like on reducing inflammatory levels. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
Cool.
Oh, I know with
Yeah.
sensitivities.
Oh yeah, it's big. It's big. Our environment, and you can't 100% escape.
No, it's a constant battle.
Right. So it's a constant battle. It's an awareness, right? So, and it can be very difficult. But yeah, that's where we're at with the epigenetics. It's look at the things you can change and see what happens to your health.
With the anti-inflammatory diet, are you specifically talking about like a low carb kind of a thing, or is there something?
So anti-inflammatory diet, would the best example would be like a paleo style of eating. I hate the word diet because it implies a beginning and an end. But if you look at strategies of eating, you want to think of something that's long-term sustainable.
That's just a style of.
S- Yeah, style. Yeah, strategy. Yeah.
But you, I don't eat food, and so when you say that, I just.
You're like, I'm on it.
Well,
Caloric
plan,
restriction,
I
done.
have no idea.
Right.
What changed.
But that's so we also talked last time, the last class we had where we looked at modifiable lifestyle factors. We talked about how you can have an excess either way. So you could be eating way too much crappy food. You could be eating not enough calories to provide the building blocks. So you got to find that happy medium.
I see the doubt in you, and I say I don't eat.
No, I get it. I
I
get it.
can't force myself to eat if I don't eat. I
That
don't know how to explain that to people. People don't believe me.
no,
When I
it's
say that.
it's understandable. And that's you're not alone in the sense of not that's a real thing.
You say nutrition, I think of Mount Everest.
Hmm.
No oxygen
That's
tanks.
yeah,
And I don't know how I would be able to accomplish that.
one step at a time. But that's I think the biggest changes that we can make in our lives are the ones that are probably the hardest to do. Those are the ones you should probably attack first, or the hardest. You know.
Just can't see forcing myself to eat though.
Well, think of it in a different way then. Rather than forcing yourself to eat, exploring what you like to eat.
Nothing. I haven't had anything to eat today. Period.
Well, I'm going to cook for you, brother.
It's just
We're having a cookout next weekend.
If you ever meet Carrie, ask her what her single,
Yeah.
our biggest argument is. It's food.
Sure.
She needs to eat 3 times a day. I can go without.
And that's
I don't even think about it.
yeah. You're here, my man. You're here making changes, and now we're bringing awareness, and that's good. We need
Polar
awareness.
opposite. I get hangry if I don't eat.
Yeah.
My eldest sister's the same way.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't eat.
Sure.
So, but food to me and Kimberly is just
Yeah.
it's kryptonite. It's something we don't need.
Yeah. Well, sometimes like with
Explain that.
and you don't have to. You don't have to. And sometimes like trying to something is going to be beneficial. And that's kind of like with mindset, you might have to fake it a little bit to make it. And if you're trying to add, you might have to force yourself to eat something. But again, think of it in a way of like, how am I going to make this pleasurable? Like, what do I like? And then you go a little bit deeper. You don't have to answer right now. You just start thinking about these things. And you start experimenting and playing with
Well,
it.
I've tried.
Yeah.
I've tried, but I just put my favorite meal in front of me right now, and I still walk away from it.
I get it.
You know, it's
So
just,
there's something deep in there, man. Yeah.
at least I know Kim understands this, so I'm not too going mental over it.
Which is good. It's a process, man.
99% of people simply think I'm full of shit when I say that.
Well, I don't think you're full of shit.
You ever been out of the country, traveling abroad and that?
Not out of the country, but Kim lives in Boston.
No, I mean, like if you go to Europe, the food there, it's totally,
It's a la carte. Carrie travels.
no, it's just totally different. You take a grape over there, and one grape, it's like, oh my God, the flavor, because it's not craft food like we have here in this country.
I just saw
And
the
you
thing.
might expose yourself to something like that, and then you'd really crave.
That could be.
Because
Might change it.
Here, the food, I mean, the tomatoes you get in the store, garbage, you know?
We used to grow our own tomatoes.
Oh, sure, you know that. That's how almost everything, I mean, it gets worse every year, but Europe, I mean, it was like, oh, it was
Yeah.
Carrie talks
Italy,
about
France, it's just.
Well, that's the
like, oh.
experimentation piece, right? Looking at different avenues. What you got, Zach?
So could this, with food or eating, like train your body, just like the water, like Scott, when you first came in here, like that's impossible, where you have to train your body to drink that much. You'll feel a lot, but your body will get used to it.
Yeah.
Train, is that shit like he trained his body to
Absolutely.
like smaller meals
Yeah.
eventually?
Well, think of it this way: like kids that don't like certain foods, like maybe the 8th time you try it, you'll like it now. You just kind of have to keep exposing yourself to these things.
But it's not a matter of not liking. It's
Sure.
a matter of not needing it. Because the water, the other liquid I put in is my energy, my
Sure.
sustenance.
Well, then you have to look at, so the need for food doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be hungry to eat it. The need for food is more sustenance for life, so your body's not degenerating at a rapid pace, that you're creating an environment where your body is maintaining itself and healing versus just constant decline.
Train your body to not have to.
People tell me that all the time, but then you would have to throw my sister into that equation too, and I know she doesn't. She has the same.
People have different metabolisms,
she's
so
4'11",
caloric
90
need is going to be
pounds.
different from one person to the other.
See, Kim and I are the same. I mean, just
Yeah?
the only thing that separates is about a foot.
I think that goes back to like genetics.
Yeah, there's genetics too. So you might not necessarily be able to change your metabolism, but you might change your perspective on why you eat. Because you might not eat because it tastes good. Like I eat because I know that I'm giving myself something that my body's going to use to make my brain operate better, to make my muscles develop better, to reduce my anxiety levels.
That causes anxiety right there.
Yeah.
It's just-
Well, sometimes you, and again, perspective, mindset, turning this into something where it's like play. You gotta, it's an uncomfortable thing, but you have to kind of come at it from a perspective of like you're creating something. You're playing with the idea of something new that might be a little scary, might be a little uncomfortable. That means it needs to be done, most likely. Well, that's again, whenever I feel nervous about something new, I'm like, I feel like I need to step into this a little bit more. Let's see what's on the other side.
Subjects like that, I'll jump right in. 'Cause I don't like not having the knowledge. or
That's
being
good.
able to do that, but this is
You're stepping into something that your body's saying like, I think we need to step into this a little more. There's something big there, man. I don't know what it is, but I think when you step into it,
big.
it's going to be a huge shift for you. But that's all I got. Drink some water.
Thanks, God.
You're welcome.